Tim Lawson.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I share the Lord Chancellor's sense of déjà vu after the second reading of this bill on the 7th of October. So, like every good environmentalist, I have recycled my speech from the 2nd of October. It was an important subject then. It is an even more important subject now. So I'm delighted to be one of no fewer than 84 people put in to speak today, which shows just how widespread the support and interest in this subject is. I'm delighted to make my debut in this virtual Parliament, but most of all, I'm delighted to come after that fantastic maiden speech by my honourable friend for Hindburn, the first virtual maiden speech, but there was nothing virtual about its content. I think we all welcome the latest bloody difficult woman to this chamber. She achieved her third first today. It was also the third for the Brickcliffe family, following her father's two unsuccessful attempts to win that seat. She did it on the third time, and this place is greatly enriched by her success. Now, I said at the time that domestic abuse was an important subject, but the coronavirus crisis has emphasised what a big problem it really is and how urgent it is to find practical solutions now. I welcome many of the measures within the bill, which I'm sure will be improved further during its passage. But in 2019, nearly 2.4 million people, overwhelmingly women, reported being subject to domestic abuse, according to the charity Attenti. 173 women and 13 men were killed by a partner or former partner, representing an increase of some 32 in 2019 over 2018, and two-thirds of them were killed in their own homes. But also we forget the hidden toll of the estimated 400 people, again mostly women, who commit suicide each year, who have attended hospital for domestic abuse injuries in those previous 6 months. But we know now, as many have already said, that domestic abuse has flourished during the coronavirus lockdown, and as the Home Affairs Select Committee report showed, calls to helplines have increased by some 50%. There have been some 16 killings in the first 3 weeks of the lockdown, double the average of previous years. So we need smarter ways for women to be able to present and escape domestic abuse, and for safeguarding children who at the moment don't have that early warning system of schools and calls from social workers in many cases. Now, I welcome the measures in the bill on the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, the Domestic Abuse Protection Orders and so on. But beyond the legislation, they will not have the desired effect unless there are sufficient and appropriate support services available with long-term and sustainable funding, particularly for refuge place planning and others. Suitably trained frontline service personnel receiving cross-agency complementary and ongoing training to identify and to intervene on all forms of abusive behaviour. A sort of cross-agency approach as we're beginning to see with our approach in response to child sexual exploitation. And we need to encourage victims to come forward with the confidence that they will be supported and the perpetrators dealt with to keep them and their children safe. It needs effective intervention, effective enforcement and effective support and safekeeping. I just want to focus for a few minutes on children. Although I would point out that, against contrary to perceptions, domestic abuse affects older people too, with 1 in 5 victims of domestic homicides aged over 60, and a 40% increase in the numbers affected by domestic abuse, an increase of 40% in the last 2 years, and the disproportionate impact on those from BAME communities as well. Now, when I was Children's Minister, I never ceased to be shocked that over 75% of child safeguarding cases were linked to households with domestic abuse. 770,000 children live with an adult who has experienced domestic abuse. It's the most prevalent risk factor affecting children in need. And around half of the residents of refuges are children, we must not forget. Millions of children are affected by domestic abuse, many traumatised by the impact of domestic abuse on their health and their life chances and on their lives. Yet they are seen merely as witnesses to domestic abuse, not as victims themselves. And that's why I have a criticism on the bill. And as a supporter of Hestia and the UK Says No More campaign, I hope the government will make sure that children feature more prominently in this bill. And it starts with a reform to the 1989 Children Act to amend it to reflect more clearly children's experiences of domestic abuse and how it constitutes harm to children. We need support services, understandably which have been commissioned for adult victims of abuse, must also cater for the physiological, psychological and geographical impact on children too. The NSPCC helpline carried out 663 counselling sessions in the middle week of April alone, showing that hand in hand child abuse goes with domestic abuse as well. I welcome this bill. I welcome the measures in it. We need to have more focus on children as well.